Detecting and responding to threats in the cloud is harder than doing it on-prem. Even when you do have the visibility you need, legacy security workflows weren't designed for the speed and complexity of cloud environments. Cloud-native security solutions from ExtraHop are purpose-built to spot threats across the hybrid attack surface, provide detailed investigation steps, and help you automate response. Request your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Layer 8 is going virtual. The conference will be held on Saturday, June 6th. Security Weekly listeners save $20 off their ticket by visiting layer8conference.com using the promo code SecurityWeekly before selecting your ticket type. Please consider supporting Layer 8 or one of their partner organizations when purchasing the ticket. You can make a donation to select charitable organizations. Some of the Security Weekly team will be in our own channel on the Layer 8 Discord server, answering questions and possibly doing some contests and giveaways. Dan DeCloss is the founder and CEO of Plextrac. He has 15 years of experience in cybersecurity. Dan started his career in the Department of Defense, moved on to consulting, where he worked for various companies, including serving as a principal consultant for Veracode on the pen testing team. Today, he makes software to make everyone's lives easier with respects to penetration testing, assessments, and managing the results. You can find more at securityweekly.com/Plextrac, if I can say that right, /Plextrac. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Yes. Nice to have you on today, Dan. And we were talking about risk in the previous segment, of course, which I know is a topic near and dear to your heart. And for this segment, it really got me thinking about how enterprises consolidate all of these results, right? And I was thinking about, well, you may have an external red team, you may have an internal red team, you've got some vulnerability scans that are running, you've got various tools in use by all these teams that could be collecting vulnerability information, right? Then you've got self-assessment questionnaires, right? Where they're more like an audit, but that's also providing input to the assessment process, right? And your software today helps people essentially with this problem and puts it all in one place so we can manage it all together, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you think about the complexity that a security program actually has, even for smaller organizations, you still have a lot of things to keep track of, right? And you should, and part of your diligence and wanting to make sure that you're assessing your security posture accurately, you need to have a better view of like everything that actually is in the context of your organization. And so you have lots of different point solutions, different tools and platforms or avenues like risk assessments and things like that that are providing input, right, and providing results, but they're kind of disparate and fractured. And so we really consolidate all of that to give you a better picture of what you should try to prioritize. And you're the one that decides what the priorities are based on your context within your organization. So I loved that previous discussion around risk scores and things like that. That truly, it takes the human element to a degree to be able to say like, well, this tool is saying this is a really high risk, but it's actually in an air-gapped network, so we're not going to rate it as high, but we're going to prioritize these other issues. So Plextrac, we really bring all those results together to try and give the get the results at your fingertips to make those decisions and be able to show progress over time. I think one thing that people forget about is how value productivity actually is.
Yeah.
And eliminating some of those wastes in those workflows is really important.
Matt.
Yeah, Dan, having built one of the early governance, risk management, and compliance solutions in the market, competed with Archer for a number of years and spent about 2.5 years at RSA on the Archer team. There were platforms out there to do pieces of this. But what I noticed is, it's great from a self-assessment perspective and collecting self-assessment data and building some workflows around it. Where a lot of those platforms fell down is just the number of other feeds that it needs to take and the number of data elements you really need to bring together, like vulnerability scan results or penetration testing results or other activities, right? And what it sounds like you've built, which I think is interesting, is a very focused kind of consolidation workflow tool, really to help the red teamers, the blue teamers, right? Your purple teaming concept, and bring all that data together and make it actionable, which is different than what the GRCs really set out to do, but also had some limitations in trying to pull this stuff together.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, and why we don't really consider ourselves a GRC proper tool, right? I mean, we're definitely focused on the collaboration pieces of the remediation lifecycle, right? And making it easy for red teamers to be more productive in finding the issues. And we also abstract the red team to be anybody doing anything proactive, right? Any kind of proactive assessment we consider part of the red team, and so even if it is like a self-assessment questionnaire or a GRC type assessment against a framework, those are all things that you can do and bring in to Plextrac. And then you have that consolidation of all those results to be able to then say, okay, we need to fix these first. And the nice thing about Plextrac is you can tag data with anything. So you actually have analytics based on things like compliance. Like you can say, how are we looking at, PCI 3.1 or something like that. So you can have those analytics and start to show your progress against those specific even controls, but also the general risks that are coming into the environment. So it acts like a living, breathing risk register.
Yeah, and Dan, I have a great use case for exactly what you were just talking about. I was helping someone out with their PCI assessment, right? They had basically gotten back a vulnerability scan from their scanning vendor, right, their ASV. And so that in and of itself is data that you would import into this tool, right? And then there was the questionnaire piece where I, went back to my friend and started asking him questions, right, about the network, about what type of compliance are you, do you have to do, what type of questionnaires have you filled out for PCI, how's your network structured, that kind of stuff, right? Then there was an actual physical network assessment where I basically did a quick scan, you get an Nmap results, right? Those should be imported as well because that's pertinent to the story. And then I did a mini web application assessment of one of the things that was in question. So I had actual pen test results from a tool like Burp, right? Mm-hmm. And I had all these files everywhere and notes and stuff like that. And then I had to try and communicate that to one of our other hosts, like Jeff, obviously, who was helping me on the PCI aspect. And then I had to communicate that back to my friend who I was helping. And then there's a reporting back to, his ASV. And so having a tool to manage, just in that small little, and this is a small retailer, right, that we're trying to help out because retail obviously is struggling now. So whatever we can do to help them. But managing all that data was problematic. I had not considered that use case until you had just started talking earlier.
Yeah, and it feels chaotic, right? Just hearing you talk about it, it's like, man, there's a lot of stuff to keep track of there, right? And that's what I lived. I built this I started building this as a means to try and facilitate more productivity in the things that really mattered, getting the right security work done, producing the right results, and trying to waste as much time, eliminate as much wasted time on just, managing all the different aspects of where these things are coming from and what, who should I be talking to, and having a central point for collaboration and remediation.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, Dan, we talk about workflow, collaboration. You and I think, have this special bond, right? Where in two different projects that we work on, we're trying to eliminate spreadsheets, right? Matt knows this, right? In our own production process, right? We started 15 years ago. The way you track things, who's coming on the show, what show are we doing, which PCI audit am I working with, which other results do I have, is being tracked in a spreadsheet. And you could track it in a spreadsheet. And what I think Dan and I both realize, right, is there's some really powerful features in a spreadsheet, and it's not always easy to replicate that in a product. First of all, is the first point, right? Would you agree?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's the reason Excel still exists.
Yeah,
right?
It's the reason we use it, right? The other point, though, is that I think both of us, myself working on our production software and you working on Plextrac, is that managing that workflow in software that's specific to that, is supporting that process, is the ability to do a number of things, right? Track the state of something, send alerts or triggers when a certain event happens, being able to capture that data in a central place and not, have a spreadsheet that's emailed or shared through Google Drive and then you can't find it because once it goes into Google Drive, you can't find it anyway, right?
That's
so there's a lot of problems that you solve with having a customized software solution for this process. I think that the accountability, tracking the state is huge, and it's something that's lost when we're all emailing around a spreadsheet, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the fact that we lived in a paradigm and still somewhat do, in that you get an assessment done in any kind of capacity, whether it's an external audit, an internal audit, a penetration test, and it tends to be a result in a document. Like either it's a spreadsheet or a PDF or a Word doc, and then I still got to copy that somewhere, and I still got to be able to keep track of it, and then I start to lose some of that over time, right? Like, well, what were the results last year? How are we shaping up? The last 3 years, where are we trending, right? And so if you're not, if you don't have a central spreadsheet to do that, you're losing that context over time, and so that's really one of the problems that we set out to solve.
It's interesting. It's almost like centralized project management, customized project management software in both our cases, right? Because there is an aspect of, you do have a ticketing system, but you can't manage that whole process in the ticketing system. That's just for small tasks that need to be tracked, right?
Right. Yeah, and we even integrate with other ticketing systems like ServiceNow and Jira, so that you don't have to disrupt some of the current workflows, and yet if you don't have that workflow, you can do it straight within Plextrac. But being able to see, like, hey, when was the last time somebody actually even addressed this? I mean, this pen test finding, kind of back to the point about how everything's dynamic, right? A pen test finding that's a low today could be a critical tomorrow, depending on what happens tonight, right? And so being able to come back and say, like, okay, do we need to raise the priority on this and getting it fixed? Do we need to adjust the criticality? What was the last time somebody actually made a comment on, hey, we're fixing this, or no, we're going to wait, because we don't consider it to be a high risk yet. If you need Plextrac or something, to be able to really provide that context over time.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, that exception tracking is another piece. I mean, your biggest competitor at the end of the day is Excel spreadsheets and emails, which is the way, that's why I built Control Path back in the days, because I had to manage 70,000 vendor risk assessments and all their open issues through Excel spreadsheet and email. And then you got to, that's an exception, so that expires on this date. So then you got to create a reminder in your calendar to go check. I mean, it's just having software do that makes it so much easier.
Yeah. And then being able to centralize, results from lots of different like you might have a workflow for each different type of assessment. And for larger enterprises, these are entirely different teams, right? You got your incident response team, your threat intelligence team, the GRC team, AppSec team, all of the, pen test, everybody. And so having a way to collaborate across all of those folks and say, like, hey, some people may have found the same thing, and they may even say, like, because we both found it, it's even higher risk. And so being able to collaborate effectively just makes you more productive, makes you get more work done and faster, and helps you focus on the right things from a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and speaking of focusing on the right things, what I liked was the use case where I'm going to do a self-assessment questionnaire, right? Maybe I'm on an internal red team. I've got 6 different divisions that I need to pen test. How do I know where to start, right? I think a great I wish I had done this when I was doing it for the university, right? Send out a self-assessment questionnaire to all the departments and let them fill that out. Like, do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus? I mean, it's obviously going to look much different today. And then get those results back in, put those inside of your tracking tool, in this case, Plextrac, and then help set the priority for those tests, right? Look at the data, be able to visualize it and say, I think we need to start here, right? Or maybe there's, we asked them if they were going to implement some security project, right? And they say, yeah, we're going to do that and we'll be done in 2 months. Okay, well, put that on hold for 2 months. Let them do their thing first, right? Then we'll go in and do the assessment. They know about some of these issues. So I thought that usage of it, and then being able to do vulnerability scanning and pen test results in with the self-assessment questionnaire, I thought was a really cool feature and approach to the problem.
Yeah, because the more data you have at your fingertips, the more you can set that priority. It's like, hey, we noticed you got a project that's going to be taking 3 months to patch this code, right? And that sounds great, but then all of a sudden the pen test results come in and it's highly exploitable. Well, okay, you got to escalate that. I mean, we got to figure out how we're going to make this get fixed faster, right? So having a way to see the results across different assessments is vital, right? And a way that we can help move the needle to quicker remediation and better security posture overall.
Hey, Dan, how would you deal with some of the normalization issues that obviously need to be done when you're bringing in multiple data sources, right? I have question data, right? I have vulnerability data, I have pen test results, maybe some configuration stuff. How do you normalize all that in a consistent way so I treat everything in a similar fashion?
Yeah, we bring everything into what we would call a report level, right? So a pen test ends up being a report. Vulnerability scans can be their own individual reports, and then we track things at an asset level for more of the vuln management folks. So if you have like the same finding that was identified in multiple reports, it shows up as one finding for that asset. And just indicates that, hey, this was identified in two reports. So we call that an instance count. So we try to bring it into a consistent view, regardless of where it came from, right? And so our report is kind of that consistent view of here's a list of prioritized items that you need to address. And then from there you can collaborate, you can fix the issues, you can make comments, you can change the score of the risk, or the severity of the finding. Even add and remove assets as necessary, but that's kind of how we bring it into kind of a consistent, normalized view. And then we have an analytics module that then you can provide enhanced trending data and things like that. And what are the top risks across these different business units or clients, depending on your use case.
Got it. Yeah, because I mean the ability to pivot from the finding to the asset. Right. Sometimes it's this finding is on this number of assets, but you can also say this asset has this number of findings. Right. So you can prioritize.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Really either way.
Yeah. And actually, it's actually kind of what we do. So like the report itself is a vulnerability that may have multiple assets that are affected by it. But then you can also drill into the asset itself and see, okay, for this asset, we have this many vulnerabilities. So we kind of present the data in two different ways, depending on how folks are actually resolving the issues. And it's important to clarify because, do you consider a vulnerability, do you consider this one finding when you've got 100 assets listed there? Well, maybe not. So you want to be able to see with this specific asset, how many findings are associated with it. So, we kind of do both, right?
Yeah. Plus, the fix could be, if I apply this patch, I resolve these 100 findings. This one finding across 100 machines, for example, right? And now,
exactly.
Now you know that bang for the buck of applying that patch.
Right. Yeah. And you might have, one nice thing about Plextrac is you can assign issues to a person, right? Or to somebody to actually, hey, you're responsible for fixing this. Not only can you assign it at the finding level, you can assign it at the asset level too. So, hey, you may have like an overall group responsible for fixing this issue, but these 5 assets that are affected by it really belong to John, right? And the other 20 belong to Paul, right? So.
And what I like too is that you can validate or invalidate the vulnerability data, right? Something could report that something is vulnerable, and you've got a pen test team. I don't need to go do a full pen test. Like, let me just go validate some of these results and then reprioritize and update my results, right? I may upload some screenshots or other such evidence. It's like, yeah, we've got mitigating controls for this, or this exploit really isn't real. We don't really have that library as a false positive, or, the million different scenarios that we have. You can validate those and put it in one place so that everyone's literally working off the same page, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's really where you find the productivity enhancements, right? Is being able to say like, you could be having a red teamer and a blue teamer collaborating in real time saying, we just got this report in, and can you validate it? Or we fixed this. Can you validate it? They can fix it. They can provide their evidence right there, and then they can close it out, right? I mean, so just that amount of time, if you're trying to do that via email or some other ticketing system, could take some time, right? So the more productive you are, the faster those things get fixed, the faster you move on to the next one, right?
Yep. And, there's two technologies and categories now in security that I think is interesting to tie into your vulnerability management program, right? We've got attack surface management, which is finding not just vulnerabilities, but also somewhat, I think, threats, right, that may be posed to your organization that have to be identified, classified, tracked, a priority set to them. They could tell you things like, by the way, someone's cloned your website and they're putting it somewhere else and they're using it for phishing attacks, right? That's not something that even a pen test may find if they're looking for, like, if you scoped it out for that, right? But it's not something a vulnerability scanning tool is going to find unless you've got some type of attack surface management, right? So I like using that technology to bring that into the fold. And then on the internal side, you've got attack simulation, which I think is awesome for constantly iterating in your environment and finding problems. If you can get those two things running and start feeding those results into, whatever central system you're using for managing that, that can help add context, right? It can either validate or invalidate existing findings and or provide new ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the fact that that you can treat Plextrac as kind of a centralized risk register, that's kind of living and breathing. You have the flexibility to have both of those types of things as risks, and then you can also start to say, hey, this is correlated to that. We're going to increase the risk. The ability to have the global perspective of like your external exposure, combined with anything that's been truly exploited on the inside, or those breach simulations, truly starts to give you a better view of like, okay, here are the areas within, we like to tie things back to the attack life cycle. Here are the areas and tactics within this life cycle that we really are weak on versus strong, and so we maybe should put some more resources and investment into that tactic to see how can we improve there. It's interesting. Just today, we actually announced that we have a new integration with Scythe. So that's exciting. We just posted that on on social media earlier today, and we're going to be doing a webinar coming up here in a couple of weeks just about that integration and how you deal with the breach and attack simulation data, combined with the other risk data within the organization, and how that really helps to set the priorities.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we were talking about in the last segment, Dan, right? It's that dynamic nature. Things are constantly changing in the environment. And if I'm not bringing in that real-time data and those dynamic elements, I'm not going to have a really good understanding of my risk posture, because otherwise it's too static or too infrequent.
Yeah, and when you have a single team looking at a single set of data, that's harder for like the CISO or the director to really say like, well, I see the GRC team, they've done their gap analysis on our PCI controls, which is great work, but how does that compare to the pen test that I just had, and even like the purple team engagement that's going on right now? How do we bring those together and really say like, okay, this gap showed up in the GRC assessment, but now we've got an exploitable condition in our purple team and pen test. So that helps provide the decision makers with the ability to say, nope, we're going to escalate this. We're going to invest here.
Yeah, it's somewhat similar to some of my fears with DevOps, right? Is that as we get better at automated checking, even human checking without automation in our software lifecycle, development lifecycle, right? If we do that really well, what happens is the developers have a lot more tickets to go through, and they have no idea what the priority should be, right?
Right.
Which is why I like to have something else in there that's helping me normalize that vulnerability assessment data and prioritize it, so that when I do create a ticket, it's like you said, Dan, it's based on the PCI assessment, it's based on the pen test, the purple team, and the vulnerability scanning results, and it's normalizing that together. So rather than getting 4 tickets, right, maybe I get 1 to be like, hey, you need to update this library, and that wipes that stuff out. That's always been a hard thing to accomplish in vulnerability management, as Matt and I know, worked in that space for quite some time.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think we got a question on. Do we answer questions from Discord?
Oh yeah, we can
here?
answer questions from Discord. Absolutely.
Yeah,
it's hard for me to pay attention to Slack,
Squirrel
Discord,
here.
and my own notes, right?
I'm sorry.
So yeah, go ahead. If there's a question, do you want to read it?
Yeah, it was about
DJ's our next
how to prevent
interview.
security teams from getting defensive when a simulation attack is run. Everybody agrees on the value, but in reality,
It's true.
What does that mean?
Well, that's the dilemma of every pen tester too, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's at least my experience being a web app pen tester. When you find some really exploitable conditions, you're effectively tactfully calling somebody's baby ugly, right? And so, how do you develop those those softer skills to be able to to actually say like, hey, here's a problem, right? But we're here to actually help you solve the problem. And so when I was building out a blue team, I definitely tried to encourage our team to really be the partners in the organization that were actually going to improve the security risk.
Dan, your video froze. I don't know. Sometimes if you just disable it and re-enable it, it comes back. It's weird. It's frozen though.
Is that better?
Let's see if we can get Dan back.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I just can't see you anymore for some reason now.
That's weird.
Very
Sorry
strange.
about that.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. Convincing someone that there is a vulnerability is a super difficult thing. I think that goes for attack simulation running against Windows systems, right? Where the team is like, well, no, I don't have any vulnerabilities in my system, and they're instantly defensive. Dan, I think your point of making it a goal to always try and help them, right? Mm-hmm. That we're not here just to point out problems, like we're here to help you, right? Pointing out this problem is helping you. If you present it as help, I think you get much better results. Now, if we, in your example, Dan, we pivot to a web application vulnerability assessment or pen test, that gets like really difficult really fast. In fact, I've talked to people that I would consider way more talented than I in discovering web application vulnerabilities, and I'm like, help me understand XML external entities, and like first let's understand it and how it presents itself in applications. Then you take the challenge that DJ pointed out of how do you go explain that to your application developers, right? And sometimes the answer, especially with this attack, is I don't truly understand it either, and then I don't feel as bad, right? And my point with this style attack that is very difficult to explain to different teams is in the XML external entities. It seems to me that the exploit and vulnerability is presented and exploited different in every single application. Like there's no example that I can point to that's like, yeah, this is going to be kind of similar to like this example. Like there's no example. Like it's just hard in every case. Take that and then go to your web app people, and like it's a full-blown investigation that is going to require some tracking, right? And I've tried to track down some of these, and like essentially you got to get to the JavaScript code and go, okay, like how much of a reality is this? And then I think working with the teams is great, because as an external assessment or pen tester, I'm seeing the JavaScript, but it's been obfuscated. There's another term that they take the variable names that are descriptive and they make them A, B, C, D, E, F. There's another term for that I can't think of.
Like minified?
Minified, yes. Thank you. And so I'm reading the minified JavaScript, and I want to gouge my eyes out because it's just so... I mean, if you've ever tried to read code where everything's been... all the variable names have been replaced with just single letters from the English alphabet. Oh, God. So working with a developer, I think, is a much better approach. And once you do that, you'll start to earn their trust, right? You're like, look, I think I found a vulnerability. Let's work on this together. I think is a great way to kind of bridge that gap.
Yeah, and I guess I'm still trying to get my video back on. Sorry, I don't know what's going on here, but I agree. I mean, I think one of the soft skills that security professionals in general may not be aware that they really need to have is the ability to communicate risk effectively and be able to come alongside people that don't know what they're talking about, like that don't know what you're talking about, and being able to say like, here's really what the impact is going to be if we don't fix this, and so let's come together and figure out what we need to do to make everyone safer. It's
understanding that context and that impact together. To have a very clear communication on this is why this is important, not just because I'm security and I say so.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And just go fix it. Right. That's not the right answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because in some cases, like with web app vulns, it may not be even a vulnerability. It may not even be a huge deal. The difficulty level for exploiting it, right? That likelihood and probability aspect of risk, right, just might not be there. And it may require collaboration, which I think collaborating with the various teams, whether developers or running Windows systems or Linux or the cloud, is important to maintain in security today.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And even on the pen test side, I guess one nice thing that we've gotten feedback from in Plextrac is that you can actually identify the recommendations. One thing that we always struggled with was like trying to help people reproduce the issue, right? Is always a challenge. And so being able to show things like a video, like here's how we actually exploited it, makes so much more difference. It makes such a big difference in somebody saying, okay, oh, I get it now. I see what you actually did. Because the screenshots are great, but if you got from A to B, and, there might be a little point in there that got missed in a screenshot that becomes a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Right. Yeah, I like being able to do a video. Oftentimes, these findings that we have, you need a video to explain it, right? The picture speaks 1,000 words. A video does much better, right. And that provides the tester with the opportunity to give a little background as well, which is harder when you're trying to describe that, even with screenshots and or just text. That's, I think, why sometimes it often just feels like, yep, you got this vulnerability, like you got cross-site scripting, like go fix it, right? But look at cross-site scripting today. And the enhancements that have been made in the DOM and the various ways to interact with it, like there's a million different ways this could crop up, and all with a slightly, the webcast that we did last week, right? Where I talked about these classifications of vulnerabilities in web apps have different meaning depending on how they're used inside your application. File upload as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I having that platform to provide better both findings, present your findings, and remediation is a feature you've really worked hard on in Plextrac, Dan, right?
Yeah, I think that being able to present your work and actually be able to show the effort that went into it is always been a challenge. And so that's definitely one of the first problems we set out to solve, is like, how can we make this a more robust experience, not just to be able to show how much effort went into it, but make it easier for the people receiving these results to be able to fix them faster, right? And collaborate across all the different teams, including the person that found it, right? Mm-hmm. So oftentimes you are going to go back to that person and say, how did we fix, or I don't even know how to get started here, and you can still collaborate, and then you even have a record of that collaboration from last year. So like next year,
right.
What happens, right? Okay, what did we do last year? Here's what we did last year. So it's nice to have a central repository of all that historical data.
Yeah, you could also use it as a knowledge base to help train others on, hey, these are the different steps we took to resolve this particular use case. So it can also become a good training tool as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
For both sides, for the pen tester and the enterprise, right?
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Dan, anything else you would like to share with our audience? I know you said you had a webcast coming up to talk about your integration with Scythe in attack simulation, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, no. So, we're definitely excited about integrating with Scythe, and kind of bringing in those more advanced tool sets and those findings. We've really been working hard also on improving our analytics capabilities. So those are some exciting features. We're continuing to do webinars every month in addition to the webinar with Scythe. We'll have another one coming up next week where we just kind of run through all the feature updates and then provide additional use cases for the platform. But really excited about all the things coming within Plextrac, as well as all the things that we've put in recently, including enhanced analytics. We have the capability to show published versus draft findings. So as people are working on them, they may not want to have those published just yet. So it becomes visible only when they say so. And then we've made a lot of enhancements to the assessments module, where we've built in some more baseline assessments, like with CMMC that's coming out here. I think it's June 1, I think, is when it's actually live, right? So, but we have that baseline assessment in there now for people to be able to take. And so just a lot of exciting stuff, in Plextrac today, and have been getting good feedback, which I think is the most important to me, about the productivity increase for the teams and people that are using it.
Sweet. Folks that want to learn more can visit securityweekly.com/Plextrac. Dan, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
And with that, we'll take a short break. Come back with our next interview segment. DJ from Armor Block. Stay tuned.